Hello, everybody. I am Lisa Herrick. Welcome. I am going to just tell you a little thimbleful of information about 31st Street because I think a lot of people here tonight are new to us and you might not really know what we're all about. Not going to give you a whole lot of information. We have a website and we'll put that in the chat so you can go to the website later and learn more about us if you want. But this is a chapter, a very autonomous chapter of a national group called Swing Left, which has many, many chapters all over the country. And this group started right after Trump was elected in early 2017 with 30 people in my living room on 31st Street in Washington, D.C., which is our very uncreative name, 31st Street. And we have over the years built up the group to about 1,500 members. And we have been working pretty tirelessly, I have to say, for the last number of years, both on supporting candidate campaigns and supporting grassroots groups and supporting Democratic Party efforts to organize on the ground in key states year-round. We have a strategy of looking for sweet spot candidates, candidates who are not shoe-ins and also, but they have a chance. And as Jim, who you'll hear from in a little while, Jim is our lead analyst and strategist. As Jim likes to say, we aim for like a 60% win rate in the candidates we support, because that tells us we're hitting the sweet spot. And in 2022, our win rate is 64%. So we're right on target. So we have quite a few candidates on both state legislatures and the US House who have won, who we heavily supported. So we're thrilled about that. We have also spent the year and last year too, heavily supporting key states like Michigan, North Carolina, Pennsylvania. We put a lot of money into voter outreach infrastructure, meaning organizations and Democratic Party efforts to spread out on the ground in a state with key organizers in specific districts who gather volunteers who are from those neighborhoods, so that you have neighbors talking to neighbors throughout the year and to make sure they vote when it is election time. And we feel incredibly thrilled with Michigan and Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, as you know, has had wins like up and down, right? The ballot. I think the state house has flipped to a majority of Democrats. Jim will tell me if I'm wrong about that. And of course, we got Fetterman and the governor Shapiro. So we're just absolutely thrilled. And we got a number of House seats in Pennsylvania. Michigan did pretty well. North Carolina, not as great, but some key things have happened in North Carolina, like preventing the legislature from avoiding a governor veto. So we wanted to protect the veto, and I think we did that. But in any case, we've sort of been going strong, and we feel like we've been doing a good job, and we're really happy about it. The National Swing Left this year, with 1 million members, raised about $9 million for Democratic efforts. And 31st Street, with our 1,500 members, raised $2 million, over $2 million. So we're just really pleased that we have a still effective group after all these years. And we believe in our strategy, and we believe in Jim Shelton, who you'll hear about in a minute. And we're just very, very happy these days. This was a good week, a good 10 days. So before I turn it over to Jim, I just want to say a few words that I got from Doris Kearns Goodwin, who I heard this week on TV. She's amazing. She's a historian, as most of you probably know. And after I mention her, we're going to thank you co-hosts. So I'm just going to draw from what Doris Kearns Goodwin said. She spoke on Morning Joe, and I just think she kind of hit the nail on the head. So I'm just going to sort of extract some of the things she said. She said, people knew something was wrong. 44% of the voters that went to the polls said they went to the polls because democracy was at issue. She said something larger happened than what typically happens in an election. The system held. History is going to say that we can move forward now because the system proved itself. Democracy was on the ballot and the people came through. She said that is the celebration, that the system held, the people spoke their minds, and they voted for something larger than what we thought they would vote for. They didn't vote about the inflation. They didn't vote about gas prices. They voted for their country. And I guess I just would like to say we are here because we are here for our country. That's why we're here. We're here for Georgia. You'll hear all about what we're doing in Georgia, but really the bigger picture is we're here for our country. And we're very, very grateful that all of you are here with us. So before I turn it over to Jim, we want to thank all the co-hosts. Our wonderful graphic artist, Peter Hansen, made all these great slides. Here is a list of you all. Thank you so, so much. This is in alphabetical order, so you can find your name. And we are very grateful that you pitched in tonight. The fever has broken. Yes, I'll put that in the chat. The fever has broken. That's what it feels like. So we're going to hear from Anna Beck, who is with the organization that we are funding tonight. And you will hear a lot more about the details of this organization. But first, I'm going to hand over the mic to Jim Shelton.
Great, and I'm hoping you're going to say something about our goal, Lisa.
I forgot. Our goal, we had an original goal of $200,000, but we are already up to $130,000. So we raised our goal to $250,000 because we think we're going to blow past that. So that's $250,000 for GAP. You will hear all about what they do and who they are and what they're doing in Georgia to get Reverend Warnock elected.
Okay, and they need it. So I'm just going to go ahead. Oops, wrong thing. That. There we go. Come on. There we go. Okay, people see that and hear me okay? Okay. Right, so I'm just going to say a few things before we turn it over to Anna a little bit, to kind of a warm up in a way, you might say, kind of a foundation building. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the kind of political analyst. This is basically my life at this time. I used to be an epidemiologist. So if you allow me just a little bit of kind of how we go about things to give you some confidence, those of you who don't really know us that well. We do look hard for strategic opportunities. That's a good part of what I do. And a lot of that is sort of looking for things that are kind of neglected in a way, not always, but really good opportunities. And sometimes they're not that much appreciated. We call that zigging when other people are zagging. And we're very highly focused in a number of ways, but including on just a few states, of which Georgia is one. And use evidence of a whole variety of kind of things, because it really is what I sometimes call an evidence-based art form. Elections and politics. There's a lot of qualitative and judgment and moving parts. And we try to do our job in a careful way. Also change when there's new data. We change, but we also expect that we're going to change. And that's particularly because of timing. There are other reasons. And timing, of course, is very important in this situation because all of a sudden we got this runoff. We thought it was coming. We didn't know for sure. And we only had 4 weeks now to prepare for it. And almost half of that is gone. So that's one reason why we're doing this right now. And thanks to you guys for responding to it. All right, so this is what it's all about, just to remind you. This gentleman, who's really quite a wonderful resource for the state of Georgia and for the United States. So, okay, now why are we, why do we care so much about this? I mean, it's kind of the only game in town in a way, but more importantly, he's a fine, effective senator. And, the state of Georgia needs him. He's needed, for those of our colleagues there. We had the problem with Manchin and Sinema. If we have one more Democratic vote, we think we can kind of get around that to a large extent. You probably pretty much know this, but there might be something on this list that you didn't think of. Ordinarily, when you have 50-50 in the Senate, they have power sharing. So on the committees, they're pretty much 50-50. That makes it harder to get things out of committee. But without that, you don't have to have that evenness on the committee, and you can get more things out of committee. This is really pretty important too, because we could lose a Democratic seat. There are some states like Vermont where you have a Democrat, in the case Bernie Sanders, and if he were to pass, there's a Republican governor who could report a Republican, or somebody like Manchin could actually switch parties. So that's actually pretty important too. But the thing I've got in bold is arguably the most important thing, at least from the national perspective, is that if we want to keep the Senate in 2024, we really have our work cut out for us. There's basically no Republican seats that are really very much at risk, and about 4 or 5 Democratic seats that are, at significant risk. So we need to store up as much as we can. Okay, now why do you suppose I'm showing this stool with the 3 legs here? Well, of course, it's a metaphor, right? I didn't invent this, but I think it's really true that as we look at these elections, you've got kind of 3 things that need to be very, very strong. Candidates in the party, and in this case, they're actually in Georgia pretty much the same thing, as I understand it, the coordinated campaign. There are some differences, but the grassroots, the sort of civil society side of these things is actually, we come to believe and understand, is very, very important. And Georgia has a very rich grassroots network. That's why we're doing this, among other things. It's arguably maybe the best in the country. So just what do grassroots groups do? And there are different kinds, there are a lot of different kinds, but the operational ones, they do organizing. But I also want to focus on this. They do good things in the community. It changes from time to time and so forth. It could be literacy training. It could be food banks. It could be mobilizing for something. That builds huge credibility in the community. So there's not people that are just sort of marching in at the last minute to advocate for voting. So they do all these other things as well. But then the thing that we're, of course, most concerned about now is the voter mobilization part. And in Georgia, they're very good at it. They've been doing it now. They were very good in 2020. They were very good in the general election. It's clear. And they do have this long-term presence and connection that makes it even more effective. Now, okay, so we want to help Reverend Warnock, but why did we pick out the Georgia Alliance for Progress? Well, first of all, because everybody knows that Warnock is the only game in town and very important. So many people, thankfully, are sending money his way. But if you think about that 3-legged stool, you got to have some balance there. So again, the Georgia grassroots groups are a really potent and effective force. They just need sustenance. They need to be, nourished and so forth to keep going. Now here's where the Georgia Alliance comes in. They are a convener of pretty much all of these grassroots groups, all the key ones as well. They call it a table, and the groups keep each other honest and sort of promote things amongst each other. But also the Georgia Alliance provides support for them, the kind of support that we're going to give them. The other thing that I think is really very attractive is that this is really a turnout election in Georgia. Yes, there'll be some persuasion and so forth, and a lot of that will still be on television and so forth from the Warnock campaign. But for the turnout, it's really these grassroots groups that have the horses. They have the horsepower to do this, much more so than the Warnock campaign. And then lastly, we could try to figure out which groups would be good to contribute money to. And we've kind of done some of that and so forth in the past. But we think that particularly because of the timing that we have at this point, it's really much better to give the money to the folks who are in the best position to figure out where the money is needed most, because there always are maldistributions because all these organizations raise money directly too, and that's great, and more power to them. But we just think we'll get a better, more effective allocation by supporting the Alliance. I do want to make the point that time is crucial. That's why we're mobilizing so fast. That's why I'm so grateful that we're now up to $130,000+. And this $250,000 we hope we're going to raise is going to make some difference to these organizations that need to keep going. Just to remind you, this is what it's all about, a picture of some canvassing. And with that, I'm going to turn over to the Alliance's Director of Development, Anna Beck, who I know is on the call. So over to you, Anna.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jim. It is so nice to be here. You'll have to bear with me because we here in Georgia are very tired. It's been a hard week. It's invigorating, it's exciting, but we are very tired. We're so grateful. I actually started in 2019. And so I was there when the folks on this call aggregated such an enormous amount of funding for the 2021 runoff. And so it was kind of my first introduction to y'all and how I got to meet Jim. So thank you to everyone here. Thank you, Jim, as always. I feel very lucky to have met you all. And a thank you to Neil Johnson, who's actually a table member here at Georgia Alliance and a good friend of us down here. So thank you. I'm going to share my screen. If I do it right, let's see. It's funny, I'm still learning all of the technology, but let me put it in slideshow. Okay, so if anyone has any questions, I hope you'll just sort of ping me because I've got this taking up the whole screen. But I wanted to make this presentation equal parts information and equal parts human and emotional, because what we're facing down here in Georgia is it's painful and it's challenging. And I'll say in the time that Jim was doing that beautiful introduction, I got 2 messages from our partners on the ground about voter suppression tactics that the news doesn't talk about. So you hear the news talk about not being able to hand out water or food in line to voters. You hear the news talk about the decrease in ballot boxes and the shortening of the early vote period. But what you don't always hear about is the sort of subtle behind the scenes, motivated by white supremacy and racism tactics that potentially don't get as much attention as everything else. So the 2 that got sent to me tonight as a means to triage how we're going to handle this include a man in Southwest Georgia, a Black man working in a factory in an area where hospitals have closed, factories have closed. This is literally one of the only jobs a person can have. And the boss there has repeatedly said that anyone he finds out votes, not just votes on December 6th, but votes in general, he'll fire. Illegal, certainly, but when you're talking about folks who aren't necessarily super voters or consistent voters, I don't know about you, but that would keep me from going to a poll after Thanksgiving in a runoff election when I haven't really seen the benefit of voting in the first place. The second piece has to do with something we've seen around the country, both in Latino and Black communities. Cops are setting up roadblocks in these communities, and they're very close to the polling precincts in the area, and so they serve as an emblem of fear, so that folks are deterred from going to vote. So these are folks who English is not their native language, or they're already scared to death if they work at a factory of going to vote in the first place. And without the resources to talk to these voters all the time, all year long, the folks that are voting, trying to vote where there are roadblocks, won't know that there's an early vote period where they could go to a white precinct and vote safely. The guy who's being threatened to be fired, he doesn't know, without our consistent communication with him as a voter and a human being, that that's actually illegal and that he can be taken safely to vote or vote by mail if he needs to. So I just wanted to begin with that because it's a runoff election. We've got to get Warnock elected, but some of the problems that we face down here in Georgia have been here since I know my parents were in the movement and continue today. So hopefully together we can start chipping away at this problem. Go away. Go. Sorry, that's my son. That's also the joy of having 3 kids and working home. I just wanted to say that we have standing Monday calls at noon that we check in and talk about gaps. And so we would love for you all to join. I will send that registration link to Jim then, and he can circulate it with you all. It's just an easy way to get a quick rundown of what we're doing, what we're tracking, et cetera. Without going deep into this, I'll just say, I started in this work working on the campaign side, and I would see over and over and over and over again how leading up to an election, all the resources in the world would come to Georgia, all the attention, all the money, all the television, everybody cared about the candidate. And the moment that candidate lost by that same 200,000 vote margin, the entire infrastructure collapses. All the money, all the attention, all of it leaves the state. And we did it over and over and over again. And I would keep asking people for money, knowing it wasn't going to work, right? And so after Stacey Abrams made the beautiful proclamation to stop appealing to a voter or an electorate you want, rather find the electorate, listen to the electorate, embolden and empower the electorate you want, we launched Georgia Alliance for Progress. We are a donor collaborative, so really for fancy words, a group of donors, individual, foundation around the country. I'm the development director. I raise funds all day, every day, 365 days a year, regardless of a campaign. With those funds, we focus on 3 major things. Number 1, we incubate organizations that we see are missing from what we call the progressive ecosystem. So when we look at this machine and we say, all right, we've got folks talking at doors, we've got folks, meeting with community leaders and pushing legislative accountability in a non-election year. We've got folks doing massive voter registration around naturalization ceremonies or folks who've been previously incarcerated. When we assess that playing field and we say there's something missing from this, because we're so financially malleable and working all the time, we build organizations and we launch them. We fund them until they're ready to fly the coop. So we built a comms hub that synergizes messaging among all these groups. So you're talking about the transgender athletics bill in North Georgia in a way that can be digestible in South Georgia, in a Black community, in a white community, LGBTQI community, et cetera. We incubated this organization, built it, funded it, and each year we decrease the funding as they become self-sufficient and fly the coop, so to speak. We also fund coalition building, which means that the 100+ 501c4 organizations, NAACP, Planned Parenthood, smaller groups like the Muslim American Voter Project, Georgia Equality, Care in Action, Workers for America, these groups, we fund the act of them coming together in a non-election year once a month, in an election year every single day, to talk about who's knocking this doors, who's prioritizing this conversation. Okay, Georgia Equality, you're the best trusted messenger in this community to talk to a voter. We're going to, support you in taking that piece of the pie, while we over here at Black Male Voter Project are focusing on talking to Black men about the importance of voting for Stacey Abrams or getting involved. The same work is done on the C3 side, coalition of C3 partners, except they're doing more voter registration, voter mobilization, voter education, get out the vote, and what Jim mentioned, this civics to service model where they did a shoe drive in Brunswick County to honor Ahmaud Arbery's murder. And in that space, we're able to talk to folks about voting and how your voice and your vote has a power. The result of that in 2020 is that we unseated the DA that refused to do the right prosecution in that race. Finally, we fund capacity building with direct grants to these organizations. Now, you may say, okay, wonderful. Why don't I give to the groups? We'd love for you to, certainly, fantastic. What I will say is because, we're kind of your political mutual fund manager, I can tell you which groups are raising millions of dollars, are wonderful groups like Fair Fight, New Georgia Project, and which groups like Muslim American Voter Project. A $10,000 grant is going to literally change the future of the organization. We provide those grants directly, and we communicate with our members to drive funding there and say, okay, we love these big organizations like Planned Parenthood Southeast, but funding is not an issue for them. So let's lift up and amplify this group so that they can take a piece of the pie, piece of the work pie off the table. I put this slide in here and I'll move quickly. We in no shape or form are saying don't support candidates. 100% of the members that give to us give to candidates. I spent my life working for candidates. We also give to the party. But what we know to the image of the stool that Jim used is that nobody can do everything. And if a candidate is not embedded and enmeshed in a community year round, even if there's somebody like Stacey Abrams or Raphael Warnock, folks just aren't going to answer the door. Or if they do, they're not necessarily trusting of the Democratic Party, right? This is a community of people who have been left out, not listened to, exploited, this entire time. And so they're going to open the door to the guy in the barbershop that they grew up with, that they went to high school with. And so when Raphael Warnock shows up to knock their door in Southwest Georgia, they've already had 15 conversations year round since 2022 about, how do you get a voter ID? What's a runoff election? What does a senator actually do? What did Build Back Better do to improve somebody's life? So you can imagine how much more powerful Senator Warnock's message is when the ground there is sort of already been nurtured. So our coalition, this group that's coming together, who does this work year round, but don't get me wrong, is obsessively focused on winning this election. What we're doing as a coalition is prioritizing large-scale canvass targeting BIPOC voters. The last 7 days, we focused on election education targeting 2020 runoff voters and newly engaged voters. We called this Bring the Ruckus, which is essentially just like get rowdy and get ready to fight because, just because we have the Senate, things aren't perfect. We fund very robust canvass operations. This coalition that I'm speaking of that you all helped fund knocked 10 million doors in the 2021 runoff. That was 8 weeks long. Every single Latinx voter was spoken to 3 times, not knocked, spoken to 3 times. That is the power of funding like you guys did in 2021. And that is what has to happen again. We focus on phones, text, mail, and we assume candidates and Senate Majority PAC and others will be doing a bunch of the media work. Our power is in implementing and funding Canvas. This is just a smattering of the partners that are knocking doors, just so you can sort of get a look. This is certainly not reflective of all the groups that sit at our table or all the groups that are knocking doors. We are trying to prioritize our distributions to groups that are both knocking the most number of doors and the most priority doors, which are not the same thing. Priority doors are obviously a certain kind of voter, that must turn out, even if Black PAC is knocking 200,000 doors, but We Vote, We Win or Black Male Initiative Fund is knocking significantly less. They're knocking priority doors. And so we're funding them and amplifying them. These are partners more on the C3 side that you're very familiar with, I'm sure. Black Voters Matter, which we were the first funder of them. All of these organizations are doing mobilization work. So again, voter education. There's no registration here in Georgia, which was done intentionally. If you hadn't registered by November 7th, you can't vote in this runoff election. And so this is really just mobilizing people to turn around and come back out. This is what it looks like. And you have to excuse me because I'm not like the best at creating these sort of things, but I think these are such beautiful photos of what coalition and Canvas look like, people to people connection. I spent a lot of time looking at this and thinking, God, we have to knock so many doors. How does this even make me feel better if this one woman is talking to one voter? We also know in Georgia, with the history of the civil rights movement, every movement in the South happens that way, by peer-to-peer, person-to-person, human-to-human connection. This picture I thought was nice too, because it shows some of the C4 and C3 walk cards that we already had printed. So because we have funding year round, we were able to print and prepare these walk cards to be distributed the morning of November 9th, because we know that, any hour that goes by without engaging with these voters is an opportunity for them to deal with all the other stuff that life is presenting, right? I'm going to put our budget in front of you, and trust me, I'm someone who thinks there's way too much money in politics and it grosses me out, but at the same time, I want to win. And also, I know that funding this way, regardless of winning, builds an infrastructure in the South in Georgia that gives communities power, that whether or not elections are won, that's, I hate to say God's work, but that's like the beloved community, right? Like that's the dream, that people have power in these communities to decide who runs for office, who they elect, and who they hold accountable, for keeping their community safe and making it better. So for this particular initiative, this is our budget. We have made significant, what am I trying to say? We've chipped away at this significantly, but this is an old slide. To date, I'd say our total gap on both sides is closer to $9 million. In the last week, we've raised about $10 million. That is also, that's what Georgia Alliance for Progress has tried to raise for this whole plan. Have to remember that a lot of these partner groups are raising themselves. A lot of Senate Majority PAC type organizations, America Votes National, we're all sort of fighting and working to fund this one big plan in the middle. Jim already went over this in a beautiful way, but I would just say again, just say Mansion Cinema, and I think I spelled that wrong. I'm sorry. No need to go into that. I will say that yesterday, Mitch McConnell's Senate PAC, because he's not in the majority anymore, put $14 million into Georgia. They are by no means letting this one go. In fact, they are doubling down and coming in harder, I think, because their egos are a bit bruised. We know that the 2024 Senate maps look really, really bad. The Republicans are poised to pick up 13 Senate seats. Democrats, none. We know that Trump may be on the ticket. And if we know anything about a sore loser, we know that if Walker wins, it will embolden that MAGA base in a way that is exactly the sort of the food that Trump needs to, to really get this thing going. And then finally, I just want to say, as a Georgia native, as someone who's watched and admired Warnock for a long time, he's an incredible human being. He's a great senator. I think we can all agree that he is someone who has national political potential. He is the most exciting candidate, Democratic candidate that we've seen in years. Only other person I'd say is Stacey Abrams, who is certainly not going anywhere. And so, I say all this to say, we are so grateful for your support. We have so much work to do. We believe in this state, and we know that we can do this. We know that with the South goes the country, but with Georgia goes the South. So please, please, please support us. Thank you. I'm here for questions, and I just appreciate your time. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Thank you so much, Anna. My name is Aaron Hamburger. I am the membership coordinator at 31st Street Swing Left, and I am also the question fielder for events like these. So if you have questions for Anna, feel free to drop them into the chat. I already have one that I thought I would send your way, which is, One of our guests saw a video clip with Ralph Reed of the Faith and Freedom Coalition, and he said they have 1.5 million Georgia evangelical voters. About 25% of them are reliable voters, and they're going after the other 75% with flyers in churches, door knocking, texting, phone calls. What is the Georgia Alliance response to this? How can you counter the force of the evangelical vote?
Good question. I hope I can do it justice. Man, that's a powerful group of people, huh? That evangelical group, and especially down here in the South, you get some wild stuff. I will say that I always go back to the mantra that we live and breathe with here in our office, which is that in Georgia, there are more of us than them, period, full stop. We can win by massive margins if you just look at numbers and demographics in the state. It's just about finding the voters and listening to the folks that you need who are on our side already. In the faith community alone, I will say, we've got some really good partners, Faith and Public Action and others who work to restore this idea of, I'm not even gonna say Christianity, but religious doctrine, good religious doctrine, bring it back to service and helping communities and what it really should mean, in our opinion, and doing a lot of deep work in those spaces in non-election years to talk to voters about the fact that being a progressive and being Christian or religious can coexist. They complement one another in many ways. Any kind of religion does. And so people can print flyers and they can go after voters. I would argue that the voters that are already going to vote in that way or for those reasons, we're already going to vote in that way and for those reasons. The folks that we need to find and bring out to win are there and they're ours. We just have to go after it in the smartest way.
Great. Can you talk about the actual issues that are mobilizing people to get out and vote on our side anyway?
Yeah. So I always think this is really interesting. So our polls show that, I don't know where that is. Our polls show, I have 3 kids. Sorry, I have 10-year-old twins and a 4-year-old, and everybody's apparently in the room right now. So we have found that the number one issue that drove people to go to the polls was the economy. And what we've learned in polling is that if national pollsters, no offense for those of you who aren't down here, call without their Southern accent and ask questions in a certain way, people just don't answer, or they answer incorrectly. And so we trust the internal polls that our communications hub puts together. With that, we learned that the economy is the driving issue, but it's also a proxy for all of these other issues: poverty, climate change, expansion of Medicaid or lack of expansion of Medicaid. And so what the message that the campaigns are leading with, I think, has more to do with the economy and Build Back Better and what Biden has done. But what grassroots organizers are able to do is number one, speak the language of the voter that they're approaching, but also we don't really need polls, because all of the guiding information that we need comes from the people on the ground, the voters that we're talking to year round. Does that make sense?
Yes, that does. That makes very good sense.
Okay, cool.
Another question that came up, the Libertarian candidate is going to be out of the race. What do you think will happen to those voters in the runoff?
Gosh, I don't know. I was on a donor call right before this, and somebody said, well, what do you think? What do you think Kemp and Raffensperger will do with Trump? Like, do you align yourself and go over to the dark side completely, or do you kind of try to hang in the middle, more normal GOP side, I guess I would say? I really don't know. I think that the folks who voted for the Libertarian, if I had to guess, were sick of both sides, sick of the noise of 5 million television commercials and 5 million text messages. And so some people didn't vote and some people voted for a third candidate. I think Warnock is doing a really good job appealing to those voters and finding those voters and listening to what made them vote the way that they did. We don't have the voter file back, obviously, but generally speaking. And so I know he courts them. I posit that they'll come here. But like Jim said, it's completely a turnout game. Whoever turns out to vote, which seems obvious, wins the election. Though that we know it's not. Georgia's never really been a big persuasion state. We are a mobilization state, and with voter suppression rampant, it's really, really challenging, and it's so empowering to see these communities that have been suppressed for decades. And then a bill like SB 202, which strips away even more rights, comes through. And I was like, oh, this is terrible. And these grassroots organizers were like, no, it's not. We've been doing this for 45 years. We'll figure it out. We'll go to the polls. We'll make it work. We'll get it done. And so, so part of why I raise money hard is because I want to honor that spirit.
Great. Okay, just a couple quick more questions. There's a couple people in the chat who are interested in going down to Georgia and canvassing themselves. Any thoughts on out-of-state folks doing that? Any places you recommend they go to find out about that?
Yeah, for sure. So the Democratic Party of Georgia, and I should have made this clear, but in Georgia, there can be absolutely no coordination between the independent expenditure side, which is us, and the candidate side, which is Warnock and the party and the coordinated campaign. And so we know that they're handling volunteers impeccably. That's what they do best. And so everybody who asks, we send them straight to the Democratic Party of Georgia or the Warnock campaign or the coordinated campaign. So I'll include those links in what I send to Jim that can be distributed. But yeah, come on down. It's cold and wet and rainy, but we need all the help we can get.
Sounds wonderful. But I know you have great biscuits and peach pie.
Yeah, we got that. We got some good food.
Yeah. And another question, someone asked, what percentage of the donations is used for overhead versus used for getting the vote out?
So that's a really interesting question, and something I think that Neil and I talked about probably early on. We're a really unique donor table in that 100% of our overhead is covered by one flagship donor at the beginning of the year. And so when I say overhead, that means 4 full-time staff at Georgia Alliance for Progress, 4 staff at the C4 table that coordinates all of those organizations, right? 5 staff at the communications hub that we built and incubated, and 4 staff members at the leadership and training entity Rep GA that we also built. So that's a massive amount, right? That's benefits, that's all of the things that come with it. So we have had one of our founding donors, one of our founding members who launched this whole thing, sort of committed to saying, I will cover overhead in January of each year and raise for program, raise for capacity building, grow this thing. There's no time to pause in the work and raise money to pay our salaries. So instead cover our salaries so that the work continues. So I would say not 100%. It depends. The budget's quite different each year. This year's a tad more than last year, but I will say that as it currently stands with the number of staff we have, 100% of our overhead is covered.
Great. All right, we need to wind up the Q&A portion of our program, but Anna, can I invite you to put your email in the chat, and if people have questions, they can ask you?
Yeah, for sure. If it's okay, I'm going to jump off after this just because, as you can see, I have like maniacs running behind me, but I will put my information in here, and I would just leave you with this. You guys are so fantastic. I cannot tell you how heartwarming it is down here to have the support and the love of the country, especially for a state like Georgia that can be a colossal embarrassment sometimes. So thank you. Tell everybody you know that this is not in the bag at all, that Herschel Walker is a nightmare and we need your help, please. So thank you guys. I'll put my information in.
Thank you, Anna. That was fantastic and inspiring. And I know that everybody is doubling and tripling their donations to support your work. Mary, I know that you are going next in our program, so I'll turn the mic over to you.
I want to inspire you. Anna Beck inspired you, and I hope I know I can't inspire you as much as she did, but I hope I can add a little bit to the inspiration that she provided. She's just an amazing person. I want to start with a quote from Robert Hubble. And this is from one of his recent columns. He said, Democrats should be immensely proud and gratified of the results they achieved. You should be proud of your contribution to that success. Let's all take a moment to revel in the satisfaction of a job truly well done. Okay, now back to work. We have the opportunity to make an exceptional result even better by re-electing Raphael Warnock. So your opportunity tonight, as you know, is to contribute to the Georgia Alliance for Progress. And this slide shows some of their target populations that they will be focusing on turning out, and some of the partners who will be turning out that vote, primarily by knocking on doors. So door knocking is time-consuming and expensive, but the Georgia Alliance for Progress has a strong track record of success using what they call trusted measures. And so now we get back to the opportunity that Robert Hubble mentioned. You know, we aren't the best people to knock on those doors ourselves. We aren't trusted messengers in these communities, and the geography makes it very difficult for us to door knock in any case. But we can donate our money to fund those who can knock on doors to make personal contacts and turn out the Democratic vote in Georgia. My husband, Dan, and I have contributed $5,000 to the Georgia Alliance for Progress. And I tell you that not to guilt trip you or to say how generous we are, but as an indication of how much we value funding this effort at this moment. Some of you on this call have been with 31st Street going all the way back to 2017, and some of you are brand new to 31st Street tonight. But for all of you, tonight is likely the last opportunity you will have to make a difference in this election cycle. So would you please think carefully about how much of a difference you want to make and make another contribution accordingly. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. And for those of you who don't know, I just need to say, Mary and Jim are brother and sister. So when they they poke at each other, it's just important to know that they're siblings. Anyway, thank you all for coming. It's really great to see you here, and we really appreciate your helping us. You're helping Georgia, you're helping our country. We hope that you will join 31st Street. We welcome new members. All you have to do is go to our website. It's really easy to join. We'll put that in the chat, but it's www.31ststreet.org. And we'd love to have you. You'll get our newsletters. You'll be able to jump in whenever you can to help out, because we all know that the next 2 years are going to be another marathon, and we're not flagging. So come along with us. We really appreciate your being with us, and good night.
Night, everybody.
$180,000. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We're trying to get to 250.
And
Thanks.
thanks again to all our co-hosts. I know it's a lot of work to get the word out. I had several folks who co-hosted and haven't before, which is great. And I know everyone else does too. So I just want to thank the co-hosts again.